Being and Caring, A Psychology for Living by Victor Daniels and Laurence J. Horowitz, as read by The Happy President. Part 3, Living with Feeling, Chapter 11, Our Emotional Nature. Our emotions just may have been the first language by which we communicated with ourselves and others. I doubt that primitive people were terribly involved with small talk and chit-chat. Cocktail parties, brunches, and gourmet cooking had not yet been introduced as essential for survival, so most events were recognized as noteworthy when they provoked an emotional response. "Hey, those teeth are heading for me!" Sometimes our emotions seem so powerful that we feel helpless in their grasp. Then we can easily forget that emotions are also the way we experience our wonder and delight, our excitement, and our aliveness. How to handle our emotions effectively and appropriately is a tough issue for many of us. I may feel loving toward you but reluctant to tell you so, or outraged at something you've done but afraid to let you know that. Or I may convey my anger or disappointment in a way that attacks your self-esteem and drives a wedge between us. Experts disagree on how to handle our emotions most effectively. Some advocate emotional control, learning to hold in inappropriate expressions of feelings and channel that emotional energy in other ways. Some have emphasized letting out what has been held in to release emotional blocks. Others have developed ways to substitute rational thoughts that lead to feeling good for irrational thoughts that lead to feeling bad. All these approaches are useful. All are partial. Today, some psychologists advocate a more integrated approach that includes elements of all of them. Such an approach is presented later in this chapter and applied in greater detail to specific emotional states in chapters that follow. Getting to know our emotions. Most of us know how to reason relatively well, but our ability to do so is frequently sabotaged by the distracting hard work of screening feelings and censoring emotions. As naturally expressive children, we sought to find ways to keep our feelings available to us, but too often we learn to deny them and block them out of our awareness. Thus, before I became aware of richness that lay buried in my ability to feel my life, I wanted to become more rational. Subsequently, I worked hard to learn that in order to think more clearly, I also had to learn to feel more clearly. To act effectively, the ability to identify our level of arousal and then determine how we want to regulate it is an important one. Within limits, we can develop that ability. Joseph Wood Crutch tells of a duck who was frantic in protecting her young. She flew into a flurry even at well-meaning human friends who had cared for her for years. If they kept coming close, she'd forget she was disturbed about and even attack her ducklings. Similarly, when I'm upset, I can lose my sense of what's important. When I have to make a big decision and I feel overwhelmed and unbalanced, I want to wait until I've regained my sense of perspective. Yet so often when I'm in that state, the decision itself is what I'm upset about. Even so, just taking a few minutes to relax my muscles, breathe, and center myself can help. My emotions are sensitive instruments for living, alerting me to important events in and around me long before my rational mind has figured out what's happening. Even though we may have learned to numb ourselves to them, all the feelings we've ever experienced are there and available for us to experience directly again. We don't lose our capacity to feel. We just put it in cold storage. The flow of feeling. I need my laughter and I need my tears. I need my anger and I need my love. And I want them all. Sometimes I lash out at you or at myself. Then when I've spent my anger and I know you've heard me or I've heard myself clearly, I am free to let that go and move on. Likewise, when I cry, I wash away the poison of the past and free myself to open another way of feeling. As I've cried, so I can laugh and dance and play and love. When I feel deeply and express my feelings as they are, I'm in touch with who I am and I see more clearly who you are. Learning to trust my flow of feelings follows hard, deliberate work. Sometimes our feelings come and go in an easy progression. Other times we seem to hang on to them beyond their time. One morning, Bob and his son David had a heated argument. Bob ended up shouting at David and went off to work red-faced and angry. His memory of the incident stayed with him all day. David forgot it. Bob came home that night feeling upset and tried to deal with the morning encounter. David, in a cheerful mood, could hardly remember the issue or the event and was surprised that his father mentioned it. We need to leave space for each other's different rates of speed in getting in touch with feelings and in moving from one feeling to another. I don't want to tell you that you shouldn't still feel sad because I don't feel sad anymore. On the other hand, when you get over your sadness or anger faster than I do, it doesn't mean that you're insensitive or that you don't care about me. I can hang on to any feeling. Hanging on to anger is especially common because I can use my justifiable anger to punish you, even when the circumstances that triggered it are long past. When I keep hanging on to a feeling, it cuts me off from having other feelings as new events occur. When I get up on the wrong side of the bed, I don't have to stay there all day. When I insist on staying there, it's a signal that I need to look and see what source of discontent in my life I'm not dealing with. I don't always need to deeply experience all ways of feeling, but I want to be careful. Am I consistently avoiding the same areas? Am I always giving myself the same kinds of reasons for avoiding those dimensions of myself? For my own growth, I need times of trial and challenge as well as times of rest and easy sailing. Subtleties of feeling. Every moment of a person's life has a feeling tone. Even when I think, I don't feel anything, if I pay close attention, some feeling will emerge. Perhaps I'm bored, impatient, or anesthetized. Those are feelings. Or I may feel bold, flustered, optimistic, sexy, vulnerable, wary, or zany. All these are part of emotional life. They may lack the power and passion of intense love, grief, or anger, but they're among the feeling tones that color most of our hours and days. Gestalt therapist Miriam Polster, talking to a young woman who said, "I don't feel anything right now," referred to the amusement park attraction in which a person pounds a platform with a mallet to knock a ball up to the top post where it hits a gong. "You're like that with your feelings," Miriam told her. "If you don't hit the gong, it doesn't count. You don't recognize it as a feeling. It's not that you're not feeling, but that the feelings are so small you don't find them worthy of notice. So your emotions end up seeming like they're all or nothing. Either the gong rings or you don't feel." Accepting responsibility for our emotions. Those who taught us to block off our awareness of certain emotions thought that they were doing what was best for us. "Don't cry. There's nothing to cry about. Come on now, be happy." Or, "Stop being angry with mother and tell her that you love her." When people say such things to me, I didn't stop feeling what I felt, but those feelings became the unspeakable, both to others and to me. Finally, I began to believe I didn't feel the way that was prohibited. Likewise, when I tell you how to respond, unless you're strong enough to deter me, I rob you of your opportunity to have your own feelings. I'm asking you to tell yourself you experience only what I say you do. As I learn to recognize and accept my own feelings for what they are, I become less vulnerable to other people's ideas about how I should feel. As I come to live my own feelings more fully, I begin leaving others more room to have their own. Our feelings are just as real when we don't know why we feel as we do. One way I can invalidate your emotions is by demanding that you have a reason that makes sense to me for feeling as you do. I can invalidate my own emotions the same way. Along with the right to have my own feelings goes the responsibility for feeling as I do. As long as I make you responsible for what I feel, "You make me mad," "You've crushed me," or "You've destroyed my afternoon," I don't have the right to feel as I wish. I'm at your mercy. I believe I respond as you want me to or unintentionally cause me to. I can, however, start to move from responding to external stimuli, other people's pressures and demands, toward responding to internal stimuli, my own choices. I can work toward reducing my bondage to my old, automatic emotional responses from the past. Hitchhiking is taking someone else's trip by borrowing his or her way of feeling. You come in tense and I respond by going into my own tension. You come in laughing and relaxed, and I relax and feel comfortable too. Having my thumb out doesn't mean I have to take any ride that comes along. When you feel bad with yourself, I can offer you comfort without having to feel all of what you're feeling. Likewise, I can say to you, I'm hurting, without asking you to hurt too. Often, all I'm saying is, hold my hand, I'm afraid. As I develop my ability to feel my life for myself, I'm less likely to rely on you to carry me along emotionally. Dominant emotional themes. In some groups and social settings, like families, only certain feelings are allowed. In pseudo-mutual families, for example, everyone is supposed to be happy and smiling all the time. To do otherwise brings instant disapproval from other family members. But members do feel hurt, angry, disappointed, afraid, etc. These feelings are more painful and distorted because there's no avenue to express them clearly. Paradoxically, there's also a sense of vulnerability that goes with everyone's being careful. In pseudo-hostile families, by contrast, there is also a split between surface currents of emotion and the deeper currents, but what's on the surface is bickering, arguing, fighting, and apparent hostility, because that's the only way family members know how to say, I care. What's hidden is affection and the desire to make contact in more loving ways. A family or person dominated by one kind of emotion, or dominant emotional theme, as James Bugenthal calls it, is like a painting with just one color. A person's own dominant theme may differ from that of his or her family, or a person may display one dominant theme at home and another elsewhere. As an experimenting teenager, Denise was characteristically angry and argumentative at home, and sweetness and light with her teachers and friends at school. Since the commitment to a dominant emotional theme results in limiting responses to a narrow range of feeling, reactions are sometimes inappropriate. Hank's dominant theme is to be a jokester. Everything's funny. Oh, Eva died, eh? Well, she was a real boozer, wasn't she? Heh heh, guess the old demon rum finally got to her. Another person finds everything sad and depressing, with endless sighs. Think about your friends and your coworkers on your job. Which ways of feeling are acceptable and which are unacceptable? Are there feelings that they show and encourage you to show, and others they seldom show and discourage you from showing? What are the unspoken rules about showing feelings? Combinations and complexes of feeling. Emotions often travel in groups. Ambivalence is a key word in our emotional vocabulary. We all have mixed feelings. Every child is sometimes very angry at his or her parents, however much he or she also loves them. I have many different feelings about every person who is important to me. When you feel angry or rejecting toward me, I can hurt myself by imagining that's the only way you feel. I forget that you can get mad at me and still care about me, and that sometimes you're mad at me because you care about me. When I have some strong feeling, it may be the only one I'm aware of, but my other feelings are still there, and before long I'm likely to feel one of those other ways. When Jeannie gets into an argument with her husband, instead of being angry, she starts crying. She was a good girl when she was a child. Pearls once commented, behind every good boy or good girl is a spiteful brat. Jeannie is frightened of her anger. She doesn't take care of herself and she doesn't let her anger out, so she sits and whines or breaks into tears. Her husband Dave does just the reverse. He expresses anger easily, but has a hard time expressing sadness and hurt. Discovering and recognizing our range of emotions is important work, so we can know all we're feeling and can, when we choose, communicate it to others. Jung called a cluster of stuck-together emotions, ideas, and behaviors a complex. Freud and Adler later applied the term to such now well-known patterns as the Oedipus complex and the inferiority complex. In the latter, a child receives messages that he or she is inept and not valued, but often masks the resulting feelings of inferiority with thoughts that, I have to be better than anyone else, I'll show them all. This can emerge in attention-seeking behavior, impatience, arrogance, frequent fighting, or a tendency to depreciate other people, which in turn can contribute to creating inferiority complexes in them. In complexes that developed in an environment where frequent harsh punishment was the rule, feelings of guilt, anger, fear, and a desire for revenge are often found together, along with depression and a diffuse anxiety that the world may cave in at any moment. Guilt about feeling angry and wanting revenge is heightened when some affection is mingled with the punishment. One way of handling such feelings is to deny them by glorifying the parents and their punitive attitude, while displacing our vengeful aggression toward them onto others who are smaller and weaker. Jung suggested that a complex can dominate a major portion of a person's life. He wrote, "Complexes are not only long-enduring, but are very powerful and closely interlinked. They appear as the chief components of the psychological disposition in every psychic structure." An all-absorbing quest for security, possessions, sensations, power, prestige, or fame is almost certain to be rooted in an emotional complex in which we feel incomplete unless we attain that end. But such a quest also serves to distract us from perceiving the ways we feel incomplete and whatever sadness and anger we feel about that. These incomplete feelings include feeling unworthy or inadequate and insecure in my lack of worth or adequacy. Ironically, I'm afraid I'll lose my fragile self-esteem by confronting the very issues that, once resolved, would allow me to feel the deeply rooted self-confidence I need to feel genuinely secure. When two different complexes that lead to contradictory feelings and actions are activated at the same time, for instance, one involving power and one involving guilt, I'm apt to feel terribly chaotic and confused, perhaps even crazy. To the degree that I can free myself from a complex or weaken it, I become able to feel more richly, think more clearly, and act more freely. Such a freeing, awakening, and healing is the ultimate value sought when someone consults a psychologist or psychiatrist. Alternative ways of handling emotions. A Hebrew in ancient Egypt observed that the best Egyptian archers were the ones who knew how to hold the bowstring tight, when to pull back, and when to let go. His observation provides the key to a basic question about emotions, how to handle them effectively so that they work for us rather than against us. That question has two aspects: how to deal with our responses to what's happening to us right now, and how to work with our emotional life in ways that will help us feel better in the future. Forms of holding back feelings. Even when we hold our feelings back, we express them, if to no one else, at least to ourselves. When we feel a flash of anger in a situation where revealing it will obviously do no one any good, we express it to ourselves before we unhook from it. I'm mad. It's old stuff that doesn't fit this situation. I can let go of it. When we handle an emotion by suppression or repression, we express it in such forms as muscle tension. The first two categories of holding back, repression and suppression, are attempts to avoid experiencing the emotion. Repression is denying my awareness of my feeling, telling myself I don't feel that way and believing it. Only at a subliminal level do I know what I'm doing. Repression is tiring because, as psychoanalyst Otto Fennickels declared, repression is never performed once and for all, but requires a constant expenditure of energy to maintain. Suppression involves consciously trying to push the feeling down and not experience or express it. I don't want to feel that way now, and I'm going to put my energy into not feeling it. It can include telling myself I shouldn't feel that way. Suppression is easier to deal with than repression because I know what I'm doing. If I let up a little in my fear and judgments that a certain feeling is not okay, I have the option of finding other ways to handle it. Tom, a carpenter, repressed some of his feelings and suppressed others. He complained that time and again he would think of something that he should have said a couple hours before. At work, for instance, his foreman said, "Tom, that window frame on the left side of the building should have been set in." Tom felt confused and embarrassed, mumbled something in reply, and went on with his work. Later, he was eating his heart out because he just remembered that he couldn't set the frame in because the other workers didn't have the studs set up. Tom carried around a lot of anger that he didn't let himself feel. For him, anger was wrong and bad. When he began to stop judging his feelings, he began to speak out when it was appropriate instead of bottling himself up. Holding back but experiencing a feeling fully involves giving a feeling little or no external expression in words and actions, but allowing myself to explore internally my experience of it. This makes my inside information about myself more available to me than it would otherwise have been. Being open to this self-knowledge includes wanting to experience my feelings, at least briefly, even when I'm uncomfortable. That's not unthinkable. After all, we sometimes pay good money to be frightened or horrified at the movies. Even unpleasant feelings can be exciting. I'm more likely to be effective and satisfied when I act from a clear sense of what I'm feeling than when I'm confused about it. Often enough, simply acknowledging a feeling is all I need to do with it. Then I can let it go. Holding back and substituting an incompatible action means that I act in a way incompatible with how I feel, hoping my feelings will change to fit my actions. If I feel depressed, I may do something excited. If sad, I may visit a vivacious friend. If grumpy, I may meditate. Forms of revealing feelings. Often the most satisfying thing I can do with a feeling is to express it in words or actions. Then, through the psychological alchemy of finishing an unfinished event, it begins to belong to my past rather than my present. This process of discharge through expression is the basis of Freud's theory of catharsis. Freud wrote, "If a discharge of feeling occurs with sufficient intensity, a great part of the effect disappears. Common speech bears witness to these facts of everyday observation in the expression of to cry oneself out. If the reaction is suppressed, the effect remains attached to the memory." Describing the feeling is the mildest form of cathartic release. This is telling you how I feel in a normal conversational voice. To have you hear me can help me feel better. When I'm on the ragged edge, your listening can be profoundly reassuring. If my trust for you is still limited, to tell how I feel now may involve a level of self-disclosure that can feel threatening. It leaves me vulnerable to attack, especially if I've learned that there are certain ways I shouldn't feel. When I'm willing to risk a little, describing my feelings can be a way of reaching out and making contact. It provides information and begins a dialogue that can help you and me deepen our relationship. Talking my feelings out can also help me become clearer about what I actually do feel. Sometimes describing a feeling is not enough. When my feeling is overpowering, or when my description of it just doesn't seem to affect you, I can show the feeling. Showing feelings is presenting them in a manner and tone of voice that accurately reflects my level of emotional intensity at that moment. Whether I incline toward describing or showing depends greatly on my personal history, and we need to respect each other's differences. A stoic Swede and a voluble Venetian will have little luck trying to change each other's preferred forms of expression. We get along best if we learn to express ourselves both in ways that feel good to us and ways that others can hear. We also do well to learn to hear others' feelings through the forms of expression that are comfortable to them. Acting out the feeling. The most extreme form of revealing feelings includes a whole range of behavior that may or may not be appropriate. Within appropriate limits, I behave in a way that corresponds to how I feel. If I feel loving, I may caress your cheek and hair. If angry, I may strike a cushion or go out and split wood. Outside appropriate limits, I may press myself on you when you don't feel receptive or break windows when I'm angry. Acting out a feeling can be a satisfying way of giving it form, or it can get me in trouble. Acting out loving feelings can be delightful if you're receptive. Acting out aggression is equally gratifying when deflected towards a harmless target, like the enterprising young man who towed a wrecked car to the edge of a college campus and, for a small sum, allowed students coming out of final exams to pound it with a sledgehammer. Forms of detaching. Detachment strategies are intended to change the way we feel by working directly with our emotional responses. Unhooking is a strategy I can choose to use when one of my automatic emotional responses has been triggered. I may find that I have other responses available that fit this situation better and let go of my first response so that a more effective one can surface. Unhooking doesn't try to change our basic patterns of emotional responding, as do diffusing and transcending, but rather involves saying, in effect, I don't have to or want to feel that way in this situation. I can let go of that feeling now. When one of my emotional responses is hooked, it may or may not be to my advantage. You cry, and I feel guilty. You come on angry, and I knuckle under. I'm apt to feel caught, so that nothing I do makes me or anyone else feel better. When I unhook, I don't deny what I feel in response to your hook. If you come at me with anger, I may feel angry in return. Yet I have enough awareness of what's happening in me that I have other responses available too. I might say, you sound upset. What's eating you? As I become less susceptible to getting hooked, I respond in a wider range of ways to a wider range of people. Diffusing involves decreasing the intensity of my emotional response to a given situation. Diffusing is appropriate when I'm emotionally reacting now in a way that fits circumstances of my past, but not those of my present, or when my emotional reaction is appropriate but excessive. Transcending a feeling means cultivating an alternative feeling state, such as inner peace or compassion, so that a disturbing feeling comes to be perceived as only a small part of a larger, more important perspective. Buddha described the basic principle 2,500 years ago. Hatred does not cease by hatred at any time. Hatred ceases by love. This is an unalterable law. For most of us, such transcendence is a tricky approach to working with feelings. I've seen numerous spiritual devotees convince themselves that they've transcended feelings they were clearly repressing. A telltale clue to repression masquerading as transcendence is a holier-than-thou attitude. Genuine transcendence includes transcending taking oneself so seriously, and characteristic attitudes include flexibility, humor, and a willingness to let others be as they are. Directness, discretion, and signaling. People are less often defensive when I tell them how I feel if I'm careful to express my feelings as my own feelings and not as facts about them. In Roger's words, to say, "What you are doing is all wrong," is likely to lead only to debate. But to say, "I feel very much annoyed by what you're doing," is to state one fact about the speaker's feelings, a fact which no one can deny. Before I give a feeling full expression, I want to look both ways. In one direction is my feeling itself. In the other is my environment. Having the right to feel as I do need not mean expressing it in any way I please. I can look for the way to express myself that's least likely to hurt others or make them feel bad. I can get along without breaking into a belly laugh in the middle of a funeral. I can get along without shouting my anger at a timid soul who has a hard time handling intense emotion. That's the point where expressing myself turns into punitive indulgence. Rather than putting others on the defensive, I want to present my feelings in ways that they can acknowledge and respond to with their own feelings. I can find a way to express myself that suits the situation where I am. I'm more likely to hear your meaning and you mine when we care about each other. I can more easily read my supervisor's signals when he says, "What the hell did you do with that piece of work?" if I know that he's also willing to say, "What a beautiful piece of work you did." We can also learn our signals to ourselves. When Noel gets frustrated and angry on a job, he puts down what he's working on and walks out of the shop. He's learned that getting a cup of tea or talking to someone for 3 or 4 minutes cools him off. When he returns, he usually feels better, and his improved attitude is reflected in his work. Nourishment and Poison. All of us sometimes poison ourselves and each other. In some ways, each of my parents poisoned me, just as in some ways I unwittingly poisoned my children. At times, my mother was poisonous toward me by refusing to acknowledge the good things I'd done and putting me down for not having done enough. When I did something good on Tuesday, it was, "How come you didn't do it on Sunday too?" I interjected that attitude and sometimes still do that to myself. But more often now, when I start to put myself down, I'm aware enough of what I'm doing that I can stop. I've also learned that every time a person's stinger flashes out to poison someone else, a little valve opens and the poison shoots through the person who does the stinging too. Expressing malicious or injurious feelings, statements, and actions reinforces these habits of thought and feeling in myself. Torture, sabotage, and assassination. 3 common ways of poisoning ourselves might be dubbed torture, sabotage, and assassination. In torture, I refuse to let myself be as I am or let the world be as it is, even though I'm not willing to make any changes. I convince myself that whatever I do and experience is wrong. If I feel hurt, I think I shouldn't feel hurt. If I feel good, I think I shouldn't feel good. I find nothing good for me in what's happening, but do nothing to change my situation. In sabotage, I find some way to fail, to derail my projects and intentions. I may have a good program, but I don't let myself follow it. If I know how to get a good payoff in a situation, I do something else. Even when I do get where I'm going, I've made things hard for myself along the way. But after I've screwed up today, I'll probably find some energy to come back and screw up again tomorrow. Through assassination, I can immobilize myself completely. Why even try? I know I'll fail. I immobilize myself. My assassin stops me cold. I feel there's no way I can do anything good for me or for you. Severe depression is an example of such self-assassination. Or I may only kill part of me, like my capacity to laugh and feel joy. Ignoring someone is a potent form of poison directed towards others. I make you invisible by poisoning you with my ink eradicator. A sexist male can make a woman disappear by treating her as a generalization rather than an individual. A white racist can make a black person disappear by treating him or her as a non-person. Nourishing me and you. The opposite of poisoning is nourishing myself and others. One day, Fritz Perls was finishing a difficult film. When we got together afterward, he was bushed. I said, "Wow, nice day, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "Listen, I don't really have the energy for bullshit. Let's go somewhere and you can tell me what you want." We found a place, sat down, and talked for a long time. As we parted, Fritz said, "I was so tired that I wanted to talk for 15 minutes and go to sleep. We've talked for an hour and a half and I'm completely refreshed." He was able to use what was going on with us to revitalize himself. One way I nourish you is to give you my aliveness. A way I can poison you is to give you my exhaustion and ennui. This is a frequent problem in marriages. You and I give all our best energy to our work, to housekeeping, and to taking care of the kids, and all we have left for each other is our exhaustion. I don't always have to want to nourish you. Sometimes I hear you needing and I don't want to give. Nevertheless, when I hear you say again, I know you don't want to give, but I still need, I may be willing to give even though it's not easy for me then, and I'll feel good about it when I do. At other times, I need to take some time just to take care of myself. When I'm being nourishing, I experience a clarity about what I want for me and from you. My vitality flows from me to you, picks up your aliveness, and comes back to me. End of chapter 11.